perimenopause is not the problem. Perimenopause does create some challenges for us health-wise. And when we remove those hormones, we often experience other underlying things, but they've been bubbling under the surface. So many women have just been pushing through.
Today's episode is with Dr Christine Maren, a functional medicine physician who works with women in their 40s and 50s. One line I keep remembering is perimenopause is not creating new problems for you, it's just revealing what was already there. We get into the unmasking effect, why women hit their 40s and feel like their bodies have completely changed, often for the worst, why HRT isn't often a solution on its own, and a very important discussion around the fact that good girls get autoimmune conditions. This was an absolutely incredible conversation. I think it's going to bring you a lot of change. Enjoy. Hello, today I am joined by Dr Christine Maren, a functional medicine physician who specialises in hormone and autoimmune health in midlife women. So looking forward to this conversation with a focus on understanding the root causes behind symptoms like fatigue, thyroid dysfunction, hair loss and metabolic changes. Welcome, Christine. I'm absolutely delighted to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. I'm so appreciative of you coming on. Christine's work is fantastic. And I love, let's get straight into the unmasking effect. So you've spoken about that idea, that perimenopause doesn't create new problems, but it reveals ones that were already there. And I think that's just so insightful. So explain, what's happening physiologically when this stage of life exposes those kind of underlying issues. Because I think so much people don't understand perimenopause isn't the problem. It's just taking away that stress buffer and it just reveals what's there.
Amen. Thank you for saying that. Like perimenopause, truly it's an initiation. I mean, we as women go through kind of three major initiations. They're endocrine transitions. One of them is puberty. One of them is childbirth, motherhood, postpartum for those who have babies. And the third one is perimenopause. So it's a big transition in our life. And yeah, as you said, perimenopause is not the problem. Perimenopause does create some challenges for us health-wise. And when we remove those hormones, we often experience other underlying things, but they've been bubbling under the surface. So many women have just been pushing through, motherhood. We've been busy. We've been getting through the last decades of our lives. And so by the time we hit our 40s, late 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, many of us start to experience some challenges, whether that's an autoimmune disease or thyroid dysfunction or gut issues or weight gain or just massive fatigue or anxiety, or irritability, whatever it is. Those health challenges really bubble to the surface when we don't have hormones as a buffer.
I think what's really interesting as well, we're in a new kind of era where a lot of people are having their kids just as perimenopause is starting. And that's obviously like such a double whammy. And we're so ill-equipped to deal with that. I think of so many friends, like I'm mid-30s, so are they. A lot of them are not even near having their first kid, like in a new relationship. I'm thinking, wow, it's such a different scenario.
I love that you're saying this. Yeah, totally.
I just find it phenomenal that it's happening to so much people globally, yet we're not really recognizing that. The woman isn't coming and saying, wow, okay, I have so much extra stressors, plus my progesterone and estrogen are also in decline, fluctuating. That used to buffer, especially progesterone, a lot of my stress, and I could kind of, like you say, mask a lot. But now I can't. And we're running into this serious problem where mental health is going to really decline. And I love that you said perimenopause isn't the problem, because we all often think, oh, it's just perimenopause. It's such a terrible part of our life. That's the problem. I just need to wade through it. But we can, like, this, and I know this, you can really optimize for it when you understand it. But we have to spread that word. And I hope so much people, send this to a friend that really understand that message and how we're going to actually navigate it effectively so you can have a really good experience.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I actually really dislike this message that, we got to suffer through it and join the club of women who are suffering through this decade of our lives. Like, no, this is really a time for us to thrive. We have so much wisdom behind us. And as you said, though, like so many women do come up into this phase right when they're postpartum. And so there's a lot of similarities, really. Like when women are breastfeeding, we go from pregnancy, which is this very high hormone state. For women who breastfeed, that suppresses a lot of our hormones. And then we're like straight into perimenopause, and you don't know what's right and left at that point. I see a lot of patients who are trying to conceive, and I'm like, well, you're also in perimenopause. I mean, that's often a thing. So yeah, it's a great point to bring up.
That's often a thing. And understanding that as well, like even if we had the education around, okay, what's happening to egg quality amount, in this certain periods of life. And obviously it's so subjective as well that we do have to be thinking, okay, I really need to tailor this to myself, and understanding all that. And I suppose that's something I often think about it now, just seeing what's going on around me, that's the reality. Like it is really difficult and can be difficult to conceive if them two things happen at once, unless again you really understand what's happening. But I hear so often that people are feeling so in the dark, like even they're waiting 2 or 3 years of trying without doing anything or going for tests or understanding is it him.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a whole thing as well. I have done a lot with preconception health in the last decade. And part of that's my own story and my own challenges through pregnancy and recurrent pregnancy loss. But that is a whole thing in and of itself. So many women are scared to see a fertility physician because they don't want to go through IVF, which is fine. But seeing a fertility physician doesn't mean IVF all the time. I think what's tricky, I was trained in family medicine and primary care, and primary care physicians are usually the people interfacing with women who are trying to conceive. And there's some missing holes there, especially when we talk about things like thyroid function and autoimmune disease, which are impacting fertility and healthy pregnancy. So yeah, absolutely. I think getting that testing done is really critical, not just to successfully getting pregnant, but going through pregnancy as healthy as possible.
And what's happening there when you look at, the prevalence of thyroid issue, autoimmune symptoms, once you go past your mid-30s, and there's like almost this explosion of hearing people, especially I hear so much the autoimmune piece, and it's just such unknown territory.
Yeah, totally. Autoimmune disease is often really underdiagnosed. It's not tested for. And so thyroid and Hashimoto's is one of, Hashimoto's is the most common autoimmune condition among midlife women. So we can talk more about that. But autoimmune disease tends to peak through those 3 endocrine transitions we talked about: puberty, postpartum, perimenopause, menopause. And so we have a lot of data if we look at postpartum and pregnancy timeframe. We have less data when we look at perimenopause, menopause, but we know that women, as we age, have increasing risks of autoimmune disease. And it's this perfect storm as we go through this timeframe, because ultimately with autoimmune disease, the framework I really like is called the microgenderome. And so that research came out around like 2013. That was when it's first introduced. And we're looking at sex hormones, which obviously changed during perimenopause, gut health, which also changes, not as obvious, but also a huge change during perimenopause. And part of that's influenced by the changes in our hormones. And then we're looking at the immune system, obviously. And those gut health, hormones, immune system, there's crosstalk between all of those. It's bidirectional. Of course, everything in our body is bidirectional, right? But these systems all influence one another, and they're a perfect setup for autoimmune disease as we go through this transition, not to mention all of the stress, right? So stress from maybe we're not sleeping well, stress from midlife transition, stress from marriages that are strained, stress from aging parents, stress from our careers, like whatever it is, women tend to carry a lot. And especially as we age, I feel like the dial just goes up, 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 up. And we're just like, get to this point. And so many of us are living this like very, high stress life. And no wonder we feel anxious, because we're like living up here and it's like buzzing around. So
yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with a random woman in her mid-60s in the sauna the other day. So I was in the sauna. But she was saying, like, she's developed huge systemic inflammation to the point she's kind of in bed a lot in the last 2 years. She retired about 2 years ago. She said since she retired, and she had a lot of like trauma, she's a medical doctor, just really intense role, spinning plates with kids, a really poor marriage. And she started to develop that huge systemic inflammation, really arthritic. Everything in her body seemed to seize up, and she was kind of trying to understand it in her own mind, because she was only at the very start of the first person only the previous day had said to her, I think it was a naturopath she went to, okay, you need to completely change your lifestyle, and giving the full protocol of all the things she needs to do. But she was absolutely shocked. Bear in mind, highly educated woman, but couldn't believe that was happening to her, because she said, I eat well, I exercise, I go to yoga every day, I go to aqua aerobics. And she was shocked. And, you could see the realization. It was the trauma, the rush. This was the first time probably since she was a child she was allowed rest, because she, was retired and divorced.
Yeah, 100%.
And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, how women are so susceptible to that. And like hers is, quite stressful. Other people have a lot more, other people have less. But still, every nervous system, has different capacity.
Yeah, I think, as you know, our nervous system really comes out of this childhood conditioning and whatever big trauma, little trauma, whatever it is that taught us to perform, to, show up for everybody else before we show up for ourselves. There's a lot to unpack. And, it's the cultural conditioning of women.
It is. And that's a massive, you just hit the nail on the head there. It's the cultural conditioning. And also, when you alluded to, it's not just one thing, everything is linked together. It's like a domino effect. When your gut goes, so does lots of other things in the body. Yeah. And it's really actually accepting that, because we go, and I chased around to every specific, dermatologist, all the specialists without, you need all the specialists in a room, or you need to piece it together yourself, or you need to go to someone that can do that for you, because often it's not just fix one thing and everything will be repaired. Great if that's the case, but it's such a all-encompassing systemic thing, which can feel overwhelming. But if you really understand it, it's very possible, because you know what to do, who to go to, where the answers are. But I just thought her example for a lot of people would have came, as you said, in perimenopause, because the buffer went, the mask went, and then you're noticing this influx of, maybe it's psoriasis, maybe it's Hashimoto's. There's just all these things that are new to you, and people are saying, oh, it came out of the blue, not putting the connection of what's happening, like a huge change in your body is happening. And I love that you also mentioned how the gut microbiome is influenced as well by hormonal changes. So it's just incredible to even understand that in one conversation in the last few minutes, of how many things change at once.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, our systems are all connected. And just like you mentioned, our body doesn't exist in silos, yet we see specialists who play a really important role. But like you said, we got to piece it all together. Our body doesn't function in silos. Everything's connected. And so we have to understand that. And for women who are really overwhelmed, just a bit of hope here is you don't have to fix everything, because your body's really smart. Once you start and you take enough logs out of the fire, you'll start to feel better. But so many patients of mine will say, yeah, I tried going gluten-free, it didn't help. Or I tried whatever, meditation, it didn't help. And often it's because you have to do a lot of things and treat whatever this root cause is. If you have an existing gut infection or food allergy or whatever it is.
That's very true. I had chronic urticaria in my 20s, and I couldn't sleep. And I didn't know what was happening. I was changing all the bedding. I was making sure I was doing all the stereotypical stuff. I went to a dermatologist. He just said, take more antihistamines, it'll pass. Went on and on and on, to the point I was like, this is such bad sleep that I'm really worried about, a sleep deprivation, episode. And so I was so confused at the time. And I remember going to a lot of people, but never really understanding that it was clearly the speed I was living my life. And it made me really think about a to-do less of list than a to-do list. And sometimes you just need to start removing the barriers, instead of saying I'm going to add an extra thing like a gluten-free diet, or a different type of exercise, or a different, all the different things you do. It's taking stock for a moment. What can I remove that's clearly keeping me in this dysregulated state? And I think that's a helpful perspective. But, as you say, it's such a multifactorial thing.
Yeah. And, it sounds like you addressed that early. I bet the woman in the sauna, I'm sure she had some early signs, right? She totally did. We know in her 30s and 40s, there was things, but she's really good at pushing through, because she's a doctor. I know those people really well.
Yeah.
We're really good at pushing through. We can push on through the pain.
Yeah.
And, eventually it does catch up. The earlier you address it, of course, the easier it is.
And that's funny to address, though. Some people can keep pushing through it. I couldn't at the time. And actually, One thing I am sensitive to is lack of sleep. I learned that when I had twins as well. Some people are much better than others at pushing through. I'm personally not.
I don't think it's a badge of honor, just to be really clear.
Yeah, but for her, she even did say that when she was like, I said, you know, what happened in perimenopause? And she was saying, oh, I didn't notice any of that. So she was probably so type A, continuously driving and pushing, that she actually wasn't even present enough or body aware enough to notice what was happening, because her life was so busy. Like she had
so disconnected. So many women live in such a dissociated, disconnected state from our body as this coping mechanism.
Yeah, and I think that there's interesting age groups now because of the times they grew up. They're much more likely, for example, in her mid-60s, like it was my mom's age as well, they're much more likely to not be connected with the body because of all what they were fed, media-wise when they were in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
Versus a woman that's now in her 40s, again, different narrative. So them narratives really play a role in you actually having the bandwidth or even the knowledge to know, oh, I'm not just going to be able to get away with keep hounding my GP because it looks like I have some kind of huge inflammation. Mm-hmm. You know, it's very different. Whereas, you know, if you're in your 30s now, people are like, okay, I'm looking for different answers. I'm open to different solutions. I don't have to go to just one person. I can go to that other person. People seem to be more open, but I think that age now that's maybe like late perimenopause, menopause is really at a disadvantage because of the lack of knowledge when they were younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, we were really taught we could do anything. And so we do everything.
Yeah. That's an excellent way of encapsulating the way that people are so close to burnout all the time. Mm-hmm. And there's actually such a guilt and stigma around not being able to do plenty of things. I found it so strange. I was even caught in the trap when the twins were like 1. I was like so embarrassed if somebody came into my house and it was a mess. I felt like such shame. I was thinking, what is that coming from? Yeah. You know, why do I feel the need to be, you know, have this really perfect home? There's so many pressures, unnecessary pressures, that I was kind of shocked that I was also pulled into it. You know, even though I had a good amount of self-awareness, but I was feeling the feelings of everyone. And a lot of people can't get away with not being sucked into it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and I have so much compassion for women. So if you're listening, like, zero shame around this, but we women tend to take on a lot of responsibility, including other people's shame. Sexual abuse is a great example of that. You know, so many women who have been victims of sexual trauma carry so much shame with them for such a long time, and it's not even theirs.
I saw a really good kind of like an advert the other day, and it was a woman sitting in a restaurant, and the waitress came up to her and splashed a glass of water on her face, and the girl said, you know, why did you do that? And she was like, you asked for it. And she's like, I didn't ask for it. And she was like, no, you know, and it played the narrative. The person beside her said, did you just see that? And the person beside her said, no. And it was such a good example of actually what happens when something like that, you know, people around her saying, I don't want anything to do with it. The person that did it said, wasn't my fault. And I just thought, wow, that woman, you could see the shame in her face. And it was actually an excellent advertisement, because it just showed that women are completely absorbing this. Mm-hmm. And if you're absorbing that into your body, the dis-ease is creating disease. And that's something like, I think that used to be very woo a few years ago. People would say, God, like, that's not black and white at all. Just take a few tablets, take the antidepressant, stop complaining. And I was like, hold on, look at the prevalence of autoimmune conditions. Mm-hmm. Look what's happening when that suppression happens. And I love the area of, you know, when people say, oh, she's so moody, she's going through perimenopause or menopause. And it's like, no, she's actually probably reacting now because she masked it so much before, and she's actually been expressive. Mm-hmm. So that's another really interesting one of removing the guilt and shame as you go into your 40s and 50s for actually saying how it is, be direct, be straight out with it. You know, we need to express emotions, obviously within reason, but suppression is really leading to a whole host of issues in the body. And, you know, even from your clinical experience, when you see thyroid dysfunction even, and I've no doubt there's such a downstream effect than people of having suppressed emotion or, you know, spinning a lot of plates for many years.
Yeah, I mean, I can't unsee that anymore. I've talked to so many women over, you know, the last decade plus, and I cannot unsee the impact that culture and psychology has on our health. And at the same time, just as important is like what's happening in our gut, what's happening in our environment. What about the environmental exposures and the toxins and the food supply, and our immune system? Like all of these things are important, but they all matter. Just like your gut matters for autoimmune disease, so does your psychology and the way that you talk to yourself and the way you treat yourself and how often you rest and all of that.
Yeah. And that, the physical health is mental health is physical health. You can't get around that. And
They're
I remember
all connected.
So connected. I remember so well one of my first coaching clients. She was super lean, beautiful, blonde, 3 kids, good-looking husband, doing everything by the book. But her mental health was so poor, and she developed so many different little illnesses. And it was, she would say straight out that it's, I'm always worrying, I'm always overthinking, I'm absorbing everything. And it was such a good lesson to me because on the outside, she looked absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Looked like the perfect life, the perfect routines. But even like you're doing your perfect morning routine or evening routine, that doesn't mean it's good for you if all the time you're overthinking and actually not present in it. So sometimes, we're going back to less is more, I think, a lot. And
honestly, like the women who look really good have a hard time getting help. They go to their doctor and they're like, I don't feel good. And they're like, oh, you look pretty good. I think you're, it's...
Very good point.
It's tricky.
Yeah, unless that's it's so human nature. Like we're such visual creatures that if we don't see a really big visual problem, we're almost not taking it too seriously. And, the same thing as when you often hear, the male physician said to the woman in perimenopause, you just need to lose a bit of weight, you'll be fine. And she's like, but I'm trying. And I can't manage that, but you kind of are shooed away.
Yeah. Sometimes that's all true. Ultimately, I have these conversations, and yes, women, it's really important that we advocate for ourselves and, understand what's going on with our health and have some education behind it. In my experience, so many women are really trying to advocate for themselves, and they're in a system that's just not equipped to handle their concerns.
It really is a geographical thing, though. When you think, I have clients globally, it's so different the system each one comes from, especially like the US system comparing to the UK system, for example. Completely different narrative, culture, mindset around it all. It's a very, very different scenario. So that's another thing, like the nuances of that, because we're seeing online social media coming from all over the world, but nobody's directly saying, okay, this is very relevant for this person in this location, but it's something that's like alien to another person.
Yeah, totally. We could talk about that for an hour, the cultural differences in our medical systems and how we care for women.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And, I think thyroid medication is kind of a good example of when women go on the medication, still don't feel well, don't realize they probably have Hashimoto's. And it's like you're kind of left because you've got the medication. It's like we have ticked the box, but she's like, this doesn't feel like it's working at all. Then maybe there's no changing of the dose, but also there's a completely different issue that's been glossed over.
Yeah, totally. Should we talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really...
there's a lot to unpack. One of them is it the right medication? Is all you need a T4 medication? What if you need a medication that also includes T3? Which goes into a bigger kind of conversation around what's happening with your thyroid and the way that you convert thyroid hormone. So, TSH is the brain hormone that tells the thyroid gland to make thyroid hormone, which is T4. And then T4 has to get converted to T3 in the peripheral tissues. And so things like liver, gut, stress play a really big role there. A lot of women shunt the T4, the resources to reverse T3, if they're under a lot of inflammation or not eating enough food. Women who are really low carb because they're trying to lose weight, women who are not eating enough because they're busy and not prioritizing their nourishment. These are really common things I see in my clinic, and they tend to underconvert between T4 and T3. Those same women might have deficiency of certain nutrients, iron, zinc, selenium, iodine, protein, amino acids, all play a really big, important role in thyroid hormone production. So, that might be part of it, but there's also this huge thyroid gut connection. So thyroid talks to gut, gut talks to thyroid. And then we bring in Hashimoto's. And just like you mentioned, so many women are struggling with hypothyroidism that has been diagnosed because their TSH is over 4.5 or whatever that upper reference range looks like at their lab. And it's sort of like it's finally been diagnosed. But if it's caused by Hashimoto's, which is the number one cause of hypothyroidism in the Western world, that thing has been brewing. Like that autoimmune disease has been brewing for 5-10 years. Who knows? We don't always know. A lot of times it's brewing postpartum. Postpartum women struggle. They assume, stress, they're underslept. Maybe they have Hashimoto's. We're not testing for it regularly. And so, I can't tell you how many women I see in my clinic who are like, something is wrong. I've been looking for 10 years. Like I've known something is wrong. And it's just a simple thyroid panel where we're checking thyroid peroxidase antibodies. Now, of course, that's like whenever we're talking about autoimmune disease, it's a lot more complicated because your immune system talks to your hormones, talks to your gut, and all of that is held by your environment and your stress response and your past history of trauma and how you walk through the world. But ultimately, it's a conversation where, to keep it simple, I frame it in these 3 pillars. I'm like, okay, number 1, we got to address the root cause. What's going on with nutrient deficiencies, with gut health? Let's look at that more closely. Number 2, optimize your hormones. Get you on the right thyroid medication. Do you need a T4? Do you need a T3 medication in addition? Maybe you're going through perimenopause. Maybe you'll benefit from progesterone. Estrogen is going to influence thyroid as well. So is testosterone. I put women on testosterone, their thyroid function gets better. And then, of course, there's the lifestyle piece, nutrition and rest and mindset and low tox living. And all of that's important, of course. But ultimately, with the patients in my clinic, I'm like usually working on gut health, nutrients, and hormones.
Wow. And even the way you just outlined that simple framework, you really would have to hunt around here to find someone that's going to do that.
I know. Yeah.
So it's very telling, but also it means a lot of the responsibility is unfortunately back on the woman to find what you just said, what you do. They might have to find 5 people before they get all them things done.
Yeah. It's hard. How do we solve this? Because the gut health piece is really a big hole. If you go to your gastroenterologist, they don't always do a great job of sorting through IBS symptoms. They're great for a lot of important things. And there's a hole. I understand that, women go and see their gastroenterologist and they're like, I don't know, I have IBS. Like, well, that's just a diagnosis code. Like, we got to figure out why you have IBS.
Blanket statement as well.
Yeah. Literally, it's just like your bowels are irritated. Yes, we know that. We already knew that. That just gives us a diagnosis code, but we have to go further. We have to figure out why your bowels are irritated.
Yeah. And that's the thing as well with the gut. Now it seems to be only really emerging that the gut is more than just drink some probiotics.
Oh, yeah.
People really do have that label, tattooed across their mind that if I just eat better food, my gut will be fixed. And we're really, I think, deeply understanding now. There's a lot more to do with toxin overload as well, to do with your nervous system. And there's a lot, it's not a quick fix anymore that I just buy the latest trendy probiotic.
And ironically, when women eat more fermented foods and take probiotics and they have IBS, they often do worse because the most common gut infection I see and the most common cause of IBS and the most common infection in women who have Hashimoto's is SIBO, so small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And gastroenterologists do sometimes know about that. They should, but they don't always test for it. It's not always on their radar. So if you're struggling and you have IBS, ask your gastroenterologist if that's who you have to test for SIBO or to treat SIBO. You can potentially, if your only option is to treat it without testing, obviously it's not ideal, but it's better than ignoring it and just having a diagnosis of IBS.
Yeah, because that's the best case scenario. You're drilling into it more and being like, okay, IBS is like the most broad statement ever. And I'm trying to go down the levels to figure out what this really is. And like SIBO, as you say, really common now if you can discover that's what it is.
Yeah.
But again, there's a huge percentage that haven't.
And as you mentioned, why do so many women have SIBO? Nervous system plays a really big role here.
Yeah, that gut-brain connection, I think we say the phrase, but don't deeply understand how much they actually really are tied together. because I still do hear a lot of people, and I would get DMs so regularly, like, how do I fix my gut? Should I take this brand of probiotic? Should I be drinking more kefir? And we do still have quite a narrow idea of it, purely because that's how it's marketed. And what do we see? We see the marketing. We don't see somebody saying, hey, actually, it's all these other things, and this supplement is like a very small percentage. Yeah. We're looking at it the reverse, thinking the supplement's like a huge percentage. And also it comes to mind as well when we talk about, say, if we do take, we're consuming lots of probiotics, and for all the women with histamine intolerance. Yeah. And that's another area I really wanted to discuss, because you do hear a lot of women with histamine intolerance past, perimenopause and beyond.
Totally.
What's actually happening?
Yeah, it's such a perfect storm as we go through perimenopause. So one is the hormonal changes that take place. So hormones really play a big role in histamine, and particularly they play a role in what's called mast cells, and those are the immune cells that release histamine. So progesterone is a hormone that will stabilize mast cells that release histamine. And so as you go through perimenopause and you have anovulatory cycles, we don't ovulate, so you're not making progesterone in the second half of the cycle. Regardless, women, that is the first hormone to really kind of check out as we go through perimenopause for the vast majority of women, which, destabilizes mast cells. Estrogen plays a big role there too. Some women who have those really high spikes of estrogen that aren't balanced by progesterone will release more histamine. Yet if we have really low estrogen, that plays a role in stabilizing the immune system. So estrogen's maybe a little bit more like Goldilocks. Like we want to have this kind of stable level, but not really high or really low. And certainly we want it balanced by progesterone. So those hormonal changes play a role in histamine, but then on top of it, we've got the gut changes. So I mentioned earlier, as hormones change, the gut microbiome changes, and that's really significant. And women who go through that transition and have underlying digestive issues, whether you're in perimenopause or not, you have underlying digestive issues, digestion and the bugs in your gut are often playing a big role in histamine. So we get more histamine producers, less histamine degraders, net higher histamine, and end up with itchy eyes, itchy skin, hives. Sometimes it presents as headaches, visceral hypersensitivity, which just means like cramping, like a really sensitive gut. Sometimes it looks like pre-syncope or like kind of fainting, lightheadedness, not full-on syncopal events, but like this lightheadedness. Sometimes histamine also can cause a lot of irritability. So histamine is also an excitatory neurotransmitter, which makes sense because if you drink wine, that's got a lot of histamine, and women are like, I can't sleep, especially in this phase of life. Like, how many of your friends are like, I can't drink wine, like I won't be able to sleep. Gut stuff, I mentioned bloating is a big one too with histamine. So it can present in lots of different ways, but the most classic is like let's just say you eat sauerkraut or you drink alcohol. Alcohol is really high in histamine and interferes with histamine pathways. And you get a runny nose and itchy skin, like that's probably histamine.
That's actually what that woman in the sauna said. She said, I even had to give up wine.
And it's probably worse because she's in the sauna and she's vasodilating. So when you get hot, histamine, like especially skin-related symptoms, tend to get worse.
Because she was saying like, God, I'd always have a few glasses of wine every evening, and I had to stop that in the last few months because the reaction was so bad.
Yeah.
Which people don't want to hear that, and it's such a kind of stereotype, like when you go in perimenopause, you lean on wine to get you through it. But actually, that's
the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, especially when you understand the histamine piece, though. I think if people have that deep rationale of understanding what's happening with histamine because of what you explained with progesterone and estrogen, then your rationale is deeper to say, okay, I really need to address this. There needs to be other coping mechanisms.
Can we also just say that like alcohol increases your risk of breast cancer way more than hormones? Or like we're looking at the wrong thing here. So many women are concerned about hormone replacement therapy because of breast cancer, which that's a whole other thing to unpack, but it's not a concern I have. The concern I do have is related to alcohol though. Yeah.
I have a fairly black and white view on alcohol. When I was around 27, I said, okay, it's not for me anymore. We would have typical Irish woman, really overdrank in her 20s. At 27, I was getting hangovers that my mood was just too low after. I couldn't do it anymore. And then the more I worked with women in perimenopause, even more strong my view on it became, because I don't see how we can really consume this moderately, especially if you're someone that's already really dealing with symptoms. I find it very hard to find the balance there.
Yeah. I mean, back to marketing, it's this idea that this is like maybe a treat or maybe a relaxation, but it's like ultimately it's keeping you oppressed.
What's the last word you said?
Keeping you oppressed.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I think women who suffer with fatigue and massive health issues and can't sleep are so oppressed. And as we get our health back, we get our power back.
Yeah, because what alcohol does do, it's like a procrastination thing. Because you can kind of tolerate the symptoms if you're a little bit numb. Mm-hmm. But the symptoms are just getting worse and worse as a result. Yeah. I've never actually thought of it like that. Because it is kind of stopping you look for solutions because you're just getting that, distraction quite often.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, and when I think of that as well, I think back to all the people that are in perimenopause really suffering with histamine, inflammation, immune function problems, and they are regularly consuming alcohol to help, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's not helping.
No. And then when you bring in as well, like the muscle loss piece, the fatigue, the weight gain, all the things that are happening, maybe that's, say if we just look at a person that has, they're experiencing early signs of thyroid issues and they're really struggling, especially with the weight piece. Mm-hmm. I think that's such a difficult scenario because we're still trying to plug in 20s solutions from your 20s into a body that's completely different. But it's like really hard to almost believe that the solutions need to change. Like when you see that influencer who's in her 40s, who's in great shape, and she's like, you just need to eat more nourishing food and get better sleep. And the person's like, no, I'm supposed to eat way less and I'm supposed to drive way harder in the gym. And I think that's interesting, if your take on that, of understanding the fat gain component of perimenopause, especially from the thyroid lens.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think thyroid is just like a small piece of it. It certainly makes everything harder. So does gut health. The gut microbiome plays a really important role in metabolic health, and it's very underappreciated when we talk about that. So many women who are struggling with excess weight in this time frame are doing a lot of the lifestyle stuff, but it's not always the right thing, like you mentioned, because we can't just work harder. We got to work smarter. We got to build muscle. In order to build muscle, sometimes we got to fix the hormonal piece, right? So it's really hard to build muscle if your testosterone's in the toilet. So building muscle is really critical. Eating enough is really critical. I see so many women who undereat and who eat low carb. And the vast majority of women I see are under a lot of stress. Women who are under a lot of stress don't tend to do great on a lower carb diet. Now, nutrition's nuanced, but complex carbs, we're talking, we're not talking cookies and cakes and like simple carbs. It's just like good fat, bad fat, like trans fat. Nobody's eating more trans fat. I'm not telling anybody to eat more, processed carbs, but complex carbs like fruit. So many women are like, oh, I'm not going to eat. I mean, here, listen, I was one of them. Like, I get it. I have so much compassion. I have zero judgment around this because I've walked in your shoes. And I was really low carb for a really long time. I was under eating just because I wasn't prioritizing my own nourishment. I was prioritizing work, and I would like run and pick up my kids and grab like a box of gluten-free crackers, like as if that's getting me anywhere, right? And so now I had to retrain myself. Like, okay, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'm focusing on protein and fiber, and I'm eating real food, and I'm eating complex carbs. I'm eating so many more carbs than I used to. And it really helps the nervous system. Carbs are a safety signal. Complex carbs are a safety signal. And so, it affects thyroid function, like the complex carbohydrate conversation. If we're talking about thyroid function between T4 and T3, women tend to shunt a lot of those resources to reverse T3 when they're not getting enough food or enough complex carbohydrates. So, part of it is just like, how do we nourish our body? Are we lifting weights? Are we strength training and prioritizing that? Which, by the way, is really important for the next decades of our life, so that when we're in our 70s and 80s, we can sit on the toilet by ourselves or whatever it is. It's a really critical investment that we can make. And, what else? How can we support our hormones? What do we need there? And is there something else going on with our gut or nutrients? That's where I really advocate for lab testing.
That's an interesting thing as well about the gut that often is really overlooked. It's very connected to your sleep quality. There's so much new research to that. Plus, there's so much research to show how much it is tied to ghrelin and leptin, your hunger regulation hormones. So of course, if your gut isn't optimal, your sleep isn't great, plus your hunger is driven up. I think that's a massive one. It's like fighting against this really big wave, and you just keep getting knocked over because there's obstacles that are unknown to you in the way. And even thinking of like the lean muscle piece, there's so much people now in the generation of menopause that are, so much prevalence of osteoporosis because they were never told about weight bearing activities or the benefits or the need for blood sugar balance, the need for like your metabolic safety. So I think you're so right. It is a reframing as well of thinking, I do need my sweet potato, my legumes. I do need to eat more of the complex carbs. In my early 20s, for like a good while, I was on an extremely low carb diet. And you could see all the signs of like a poorly functioning thyroid. I was like really cold. My hair was falling out. Lots of dry skin, all them kind of things. And it really made me understand the importance of a nutrient-dense diet because I was terrified of that. Because I thought, okay, if I eat too much carbs and if I eat any fat, I am in big trouble. Back then as well, 15 years ago, there was no real understanding of that. We still were kind of in that, if you just eat less, you're going to get skinny. Yeah. And that's all we really cared about. But I could see already, only in my early 20s, how much that impacted my thyroid, how much it impacted my energy. I was so fatigued. And we do need to strike the balance of that.
That's a really good point.
The fatigue is deep.
Yeah. Fatigue
I remember
is
I was
such
a
a
PE
deep
teacher.
one.
It's huge. And I was always dreading teaching the class because a PE teacher, you have to move. And I was like, oh my God, I could barely muscle up for the one workout a day and the rest of the day was just conservation.
100%. I mean, so many of our patients, we work with them on like, okay, how can we change your diet in a way that's sustainable? Anyways, they end up, they're like, my energy is so much better. I'm like, yeah, because we got some energy in your body, right? So not just eating, but eating, you don't have to eat perfect. I'm not a big fan of like, in functional medicine, there tends to be a lot of like very restrictive diets and that can bring on more stress. There's a time and place for an elimination diet for sure. But for so many women, it's just really about eating more regularly, feeding the machine. If you want your machine to get revved, like we got to feed the machine. And so if you're really cold and really fatigued, that's such a sign of slow metabolism. I used to be so cold all the time.
Freezing.
Like
I lived in Dubai and I was freezing.
Oh, wow.
That's
Yeah. I started to realize like when I would get cold, I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten, man. Like that's my sign. And it doesn't happen very often anymore because my metabolism's, going, the machine's revved. But that, it took some time and some training and some intentionality for sure. Like I had to be real, and I followed my macros actually for a while, which is something I never thought I would do.
Can be helpful though, especially if you're in the mindset of your normal is very low carb. So sometimes the macro following, you're like, okay, at least I'm having insight into how low carb I actually am eating.
Yeah.
Because eating low carb for a male versus a female are two very different things. But also the idea of, when a person is quite stressed and they are eating very low carb, but then of course, when you undereat, you overeat. So you're in a cycle of maybe you're actually eating a large amount of calories, but you're quite nutrient void. So you're eating a lot of meals that, look on the surface, low calorie meals, but then there's a lot of overeating occurrence, of course, because undereat, overeat cycle, it's very hard to trick your hunger hormones. So there's also that going on when people are saying, I'm eating really low amount, but, every now and again we're breaking free and we're almost going to a numb mindset. We can't even register the calories we're eating. But then the other woman that's actually eating really low amount of calories every day, but her thyroid isn't functioning very well. So they're both dealing with weight issues.
Totally.
And the one that's actually eating really low calories is told you're not in a calorie deficit. So yeah, you need
to eat less and
move more.
Yeah, that's the worst. It's often that you need to eat more and keep moving and not do as much cardio and really focus on building muscle.
And I think you're seeing that so much more now, like the women that's saying, okay, I'm going to lift more, I'm going to walk more. I'm going to do a bit of cardio, not as much though. I'm going to make sure I'm eating like my 3 nourishing meals a day. Try snack as little as possible, optimizing for protein, fat in each meal, fiber, my complex carb. And they're also really putting the emphasis on rest and understanding like rest is key for hormone health. But actually you've been conditioned to think that rest is really bad and you should feel guilty to rest. And them kind of people that are allowing that to be absorbed are obviously going to see huge success comparing to the person that's stuck in the shame cycle and under eating and over exercising and all them typical things.
Yeah. I mean, you said it really concisely. Like, I agree with all of those lifestyle habits. That's the way to get there. And if you're struggling and you have underlying digestive issues and bloating and IBS and, histamine symptoms or whatever it is, like, you're driving a train up the hill. Like, let's figure that out as well. And especially with the hormone piece, as we go through, it's hard, right? If somebody can't sleep because their hormones are a mess, it's like, okay, well, let's fix that piece, because we're not going to sacrifice your sleep, wake up at 5 a.m. so you can do a workout, even though you didn't sleep all night. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
So counterintuitive. And that's exactly what I would have done. I would have been like, I'm powering through this workout, even though I was up at 3 a.m. and then I couldn't get back to sleep. And that's like such a signal. And that's a lot of the work I do, is the 3 a.m. wake up and understanding the root cause of that. But majority of people think to get rid of that is a supplement or a good wind down routine. But female circadian health is so different. And there's so many pieces from, the insulin blood sugar piece to the nervous system and so many things in between. So I think, again, it's like understanding we can't just keep going for these quick fixes. Like, put on a podcast at 3 a.m. to get back to sleep, ignoring the root cause of why you're waking at 3 a.m. And that, for me, I had insomnia twice.
The amazing thing about women is we can do really hard things. We are strong, capable. I mean, women are really incredible. And when you get to midlife, if you're struggling with health issues, or here's another one, if you're really resentful, angry, like you're pissed off, it's like, that's a good sign to listen to. Something's got to change.
Yeah, that irritability, when you can't seem to shake that or control your reactions.
Yeah, I mean, and just the resentment, really. Like, the resentment piece, so many women get to midlife and are in a place where they feel really resentful. Often it's to their spouse, and often there are reasons for that, but it's like, we got to look at the whole system here. Like, how much are you taking on, and how much have we trained the people around us that we can do everything all the time? And how do we switch that narrative and hopefully have a conversation with our partner? Like, I don't want to do all this stuff anymore. So what's that look like?
Yeah, because once you've made that pattern over years of a lack of boundaries, we'll say, you do sometimes need to swing the pendulum the other way and create really clear boundaries so your health is okay. So you're actually not going to go into a lot of illness.
And so your mental health is okay. So you can live the life you want and stop, taking care of everybody else all the time.
Yeah. And that's a big one, that responsibility piece. And that does take a good bit of mental work, where you're really understanding why I got to this point in the first place, even since you were a little girl, why you feel the need to absorb all this stress and pressure and other people's emotions. Like, to an extent, there's some level of nature of wanting to take care of your kids, etc. But a lot of it's mashed together with the cultural piece. And it's like, there is a lot of unpacking that and looking to, like, your journaling, your therapist, whatever work you want to do to fully understand that. Because if you get to a point you're like, I need to put in boundaries, but you also have to understand the steps before that of how you got to there in the first place. Like, that self-awareness is really important. But again, that's messy and confronting work. But the most important work you'll ever do if you really tackle it, because you'll go into creating the boundaries in a guilt-free way. You'll understand, okay, now is this time to do it. I have no choice. This is absolutely a necessity for my health. And it was even when I first, I never would have rested. I would have felt guilty and restless to rest. And I really had to go back and unpack that and understand, why is that? And understand as well the deep reason why females need rest. Otherwise their health does go. And as you said, females are so resilient. The body, like, even to deal with, say you had triplets and you're sleepless for years, okay? You can stay alive and well in that scenario, okay? Years of huge sleep deprivation. We can get through that. But why push your body to the limits when that kind of resilience in the body is made for short bursts? We're not meant to live our entire lives in, fight or flight, fighting, pushing. So I think that's important. Yeah, the body can absorb it, but there's going to be an effect. There's going to be something that happens.
Yeah.
The fact that you're making your body work its hardest all the time instead of just in bouts.
It's a really good example. I mean, postpartum is temporary. Perimenopause is not temporary. It is a transition. It is an initiation into a new phase of life.
Yeah. And your body's
And
different.
Your body's different. Our bodies are different. We have to treat them differently. Just like in puberty, like our body is different, right? Like we somehow, it seems that we understand that better. Like when we go from girl to woman, that like our body's different. And then when we go from, mother to queen phase, our body is different. Our hormones are different. How do we honor our bodies in a different way? And I think, as we mentioned at the beginning, part of the challenge is our system is just not equipped to look at the whole picture and really help women in a meaningful way in many instances. I mean, we've got to do better.
Yeah, even I think when I saw a marketing campaign recently and it was like, avoid aging. It was that kind of message, avoid aging. I was like, God, that narrative is so toxic. Instead of saying, why don't we age in the most optimal way we can? I just thought it was such a narrative that's like shoved down your throat.
Yeah.
Why should I feel like bad for looking my age?
Yeah. I mean, let's age well and age confidently.
Yeah. It's like Rihanna is 37 and they were like, what happened to her in the last 20 years? And people are like, first of all, she's 20 years older and she has more children. Her life has evolved. Like, expecting this eternal youth and you're, this ugly hag, if you age normally, is just such a wild narrative, really.
Yeah, we sure do make it challenging for women and girls, huh?
Yeah. Even now, like 2 daughters, I'm like all the time wondering how I'm going to make sure they have deep self-worth and they're not swayed by all the externals. But again, like now, they're only 5, okay? We're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And we're thinking, okay, how am I going to do that now? Now I need to change the narrative. Because that's also leading to a lot of stress in your body.
Yeah.
You dreading getting older and aging.
Yeah. And understanding, like, goes back to cultural conditioning, that our worth is inherent. It's not based on what we perform or how we look.
I really found it hard at the beginning when I started to meditate. And, they're like, you are no one, you are nothing, you are nowhere.
Like, you're doing Joe Dispenza, aren't you?
I'm doing Joe Dispenza.
I know exactly what you're doing. Me too, girl.
Years and years of doing it.
this weekend, actually.
Oh, nice. I was actually meant to go to the one in Basel, but our flights got cancelled.
Yeah.
So you're going this weekend. Oh my gosh. I wish I could join. But yeah, like that kind of thing is a really good example of you want that inherent self-worth. And like at the beginning, I used to panic in the meditation because I was like, but I am nothing then. I'm nothing without the labels of, mother and daughter. This is my job. I found that so interesting because my mom's one of 6 sisters. And like the narrative of that age group in like 60s and 70s is so different to the narrative in your 30s. Your 60s and 70s is like, oh, I'm kind of dependent on my husband. Like the sign of that I succeeded in life is I have a husband and kids. Labels. So then what's your deep self-worth when you have an empty nest? In your 60s and maybe your husband passed away, you're divorced, what happens then? You feel worthless.
Here's a good one. Like being a good girl. What does that look like? What does it mean to be a good girl? To be compliant, to be responsible for everything. That being good. It's like, we're not good, we're not bad.
No, good girls get autoimmune conditions.
Good, exactly. Yeah.
If we're straight to the point, because you're, again, suppression all the time.
Yeah.
If somebody came to you, and I think it's a nice one to end on, and they're really resonating with everything we're saying, and they're in, say, their late 30s, they're noticing I'm more irritable, I'm gaining weight, I don't feel like myself anymore, which is such a common phrase. What would you say to them in part words of wisdom?
I would say, take a look at, number 1, your physiology. What's happening in your body? You deserve labs. I know getting lab testing from your doctor is not always easy. There's a lot of places you can go get labs that are not from your doctor now, right?
So much online.
Yeah, if you need to do that and get data somewhere else, get data somewhere else. But that lab data is helpful. That is how we find out if you have an underfunctioning thyroid, if you have a B12 deficiency, if you have, whatever else. It's like paying attention to mental health is really important. But if you have an underlying B12 deficiency and hypothyroidism, that's really hard. They're both important. They both affect one another. So I would say, number 1, get a big lab panel, get some data. And number 2, investigate how you're living your life. Is it aligned with you? Does it line up with you and who you truly are? And if you can't answer that, and you are in a place where maybe you just start crying, or you just like, I don't even know who I am, like, it's time to really invest in like understanding yourself and getting aligned with who you are and why you're here on this planet and what you're meant to do, and all of that. I mean, we each have this beautiful life to live, and it's such a gift. And I think, for so many of us, it goes off course.
Yeah, and it's course correction. It's not just accepting that this is it. There's a chance here to course correct, and I do need to be a bit of an investigator.
Yeah, I mean, I would say too, like, for women who are have that feeling that something is wrong. So many women are like, something's off, but they're just like, my labs are normal. Well, it's like your CBC is normal, your blood count, right? If something feels wrong, something's wrong. Like, we just have to find it.
Trusting of the gut is a huge one. Actually learning how to do that, not to override all the signals.
Yeah. Well, and just trusting, like, the answers are inside of ourselves. If something is off, your body better than anyone. Yeah. And I think really self-trust is a big one that we have to tap back into and develop, because we've been taught not to do that.
Oh, I love that. Like giving permission to listen to the voice or the gut instinct, or something that's saying, I don't feel myself. Actually, don't ignore that. Right. I love that. Christine, where can people find you? I've no doubt so much people are going to want to check out your content now, because I just found that conversation absolutely invaluable.
We could talk for a long time.
Yeah.
We need to, next time you're at a meditation retreat, you send me a message so we can meet up.
How can I go to Joe Dispenza this weekend?
I would love to see you there. We'll be in the same color group. DrChristineMaren.com is my website. That's also where I am on Instagram and Facebook.
Brilliant. Thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.
That was Dr. Christine Maren. And if you want to do the work we spoke about and put your nervous system first, my Rebalance membership community is for women in perimenopause who want clear daily actions and steps to regulate their nervous system. That is the work that makes the sleep part and the fat loss part possible. The link is in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.